The alarm clock screamed at 4:47 a.m., 3 minutes before it was supposed to, and Maya Chen slammed her hand down on it with the practiced precision of someone who'd been doing this exact routine for 3 years straight. The small studio apartment was still dark, the city outside her window just beginning to show the first hints of that pre-dawn purple that meant another day was starting. Whether she was ready or not, she wasn't ready. She was never ready. But that didn't matter, because the 6 a.m. shift at Henderson's downtown diner waited for no one, and she'd already been written up twice this month for clocking in late. Maya dragged herself out of bed, her feet hitting the cold floor with a slap that sent a jolt through her tired body, and stumbled toward the bathroom where her uniform hung on a hook behind the door. The black pants had a small tear near the left pocket that she'd been meaning to sew for 2 weeks. The white shirt had a coffee stain on the collar that wouldn't come out no matter how much bleach she used. The name tag, slightly crooked and scratched, read Maya in fading letters. She splashed water on her face, pulled her dark hair into a ponytail that was already coming loose, and grabbed her keys. The bus wouldn't wait, and neither would her boss. Henderson sat on the corner of 5th and Madison, a relic from the 1950s that somehow still managed to pull in decent business despite the Starbucks across the street and the hipster cafe 2 doors down. The red vinyl booths were cracked and patched with duct tape. The checkerboard floor was faded and chipped. The coffee was bitter and the eggs were always slightly rubbery, but people came anyway because it was cheap and it was familiar, and sometimes that's all you need. Maya had worked there since dropping out of community college to help her mother with medical bills, a decision she'd told herself was temporary but was starting to feel permanent. She pushed through the front door at 5:53 a.m., 7 minutes early for once, and found her co-worker Danny already behind the counter filling salt shakers. He looked up, eyebrows raised in mock surprise. "Early? You feeling okay?" Maya flipped him off with a tired smile and grabbed her apron from the hook. Don't get used to it. The morning rush would start in an hour, and she needed to prep the condiment stations, brew fresh coffee, and mentally prepare herself for 8 hours of fake smiles and aching feet. The man came in at exactly 7:15 a.m., the same time he came in every Tuesday and Thursday, and Maya knew his order before he sat down. Black coffee, 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast dry, no butter. He always sat in booth 7, the corner one by the window, where the morning light came in at just the right angle. He was older, maybe 65 or 70, with silver hair combed back perfectly, and suits that probably cost more than Maya made in 3 months. But the thing that made him different from the other business types who rushed in and out was the white cane he carried, folded neatly when he walked, and the dark glasses he wore even inside. Maya had served him maybe 50 times over the past year, but they'd never exchanged more than pleasantries. He was always polite, always tipped exactly 20%, and always left within 30 minutes. She brought over his coffee without being asked, setting it down gently in front of him. "Morning, sir." The usual. His face turned toward her voice and he smiled, that small, controlled smile he always gave. "Good morning. Yes, thank you." His voice was deep and measured, the kind of voice that suggested he was used to being listened to. Maya scribbled the order on her pad even though she had it memorized and turned toward the kitchen. Behind her she heard him pull out his phone, some kind of device speaking the screen contents to him in a robotic female voice. She'd always wondered about him, wondered what he did for a living, wondered how he got to the diner every morning, wondered if he had family or if he was alone. There was something lonely about him despite the expensive clothes and the confident way he carried himself. Maya had seen a lot of lonely people in 3 years of waitressing, and she'd gotten good at recognizing the signs. It was in the way they lingered over their coffee, the way they seemed reluctant to leave, the way they engaged you in conversation about nothing just to hear another human voice. When she brought his eggs he thanked her again, and she noticed his hand trembled slightly as he reached for his fork, not from age or weakness, but from something else, uncertainty maybe. The world was a different place when you couldn't see it, and Maya couldn't imagine navigating it with that kind of grace. "Enjoy your meal, sir." She moved on to the next table, a family with 2 screaming toddlers who were dumping syrup on everything in reach, and forgot about the man in booth 7, until she saw him standing by the register 30 minutes later, wallet open, waiting to pay. Maya's shift ended at 2 p.m., But Danny had called in sick for the evening shift, which meant her boss Gary had given her that look, that you need the hours anyway look, and she'd agreed to pull a double even though her feet were already screaming and she had a headache building behind her eyes. She'd get a 30-minute break at least, time enough to grab something to eat and maybe sit down somewhere that wasn't the diner. She clocked out, grabbed her jacket and pushed out into the afternoon sun. The city was alive with that midweek energy, people rushing between meetings, delivery trucks double parked and blocking traffic, the smell of hot dogs and exhaust mixing into that distinctly urban perfume that Maya had stopped noticing years ago. She was headed toward the bodega on 6th, where they made decent sandwiches for $5 when she saw him, the man from booth 7, standing at the intersection of 5th and Madison, his white cane extended, waiting for the walk signal, except the walk signal had been broken for 3 days, stuck on the red hand, and the city hadn't fixed it yet. Maya had seen 2 near accidents at this corner already this week because pedestrians kept jaywalking when they got impatient. She watched as he stood there, head tilted slightly, listening to the traffic. The light changed, cars stopped, the intersection cleared, but the walk signal stayed red, and he stayed put, waiting for an audio cue that wasn't coming. Maya glanced at her phone. She had 28 minutes left on her break. The sandwich could wait. She walked over to him, her voice coming out gentler than it usually did. "Excuse me, sir. The walk signal's broken. Would you like help crossing?" He turned toward her, and she saw his jaw tighten slightly, that brief flash of pride or independence, or maybe just frustration at needing help. But then he nodded, and that small smile appeared again. "I would appreciate that, thank you." Maya offered her arm, the way she'd seen people do in movies, and he took it, his grip firm but light. They waited for the next light cycle, and when the traffic stopped, she guided him across, describing what she saw. "We're crossing now." Traffic stopped on both sides, about halfway across, curb coming up in 3 steps. They reached the other side and he released her arm, turning to face her fully. "Thank you very much. That signal's been giving me trouble all week." Maya shrugged. "City maintenance isn't what it used to be. Are you okay from here?" He nodded, unfolding his cane. "Yes, thank you. My driver's picking me up just down the block." Maya made it back to the diner with 4 minutes to spare, scarfed down a turkey sandwich while standing by the dishwasher, and spent the next 6 hours in a blur of orders and complaints, and the steady rhythm of plates and coffee pots, and the cash register's electronic beep. It wasn't until she was on the bus home at 10:30 p.m., her body aching in places she didn't know could ache, that she thought about the man at the crosswalk again. She pulled out her phone, scrolling mindlessly through social media the way everyone does when they're too tired to actually process information, and saw a headline that made her stop. "Henderson Restaurant Group announces expansion plans." She almost scrolled past it, but something made her click. Henderson Restaurant Group, the same name as the diner. She'd always assumed Henderson's was just a local place, maybe a small chain with 2 or 3 locations, but the article described a massive corporation with over 200 restaurants nationwide, including casual dining chains, fast food franchises, and upscale eateries in major cities. The company was worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and there in the photo at the top of the article was the man from booth 7. His name was Robert Henderson, founder and CEO of Henderson Restaurant Group. The article talked about his business philosophy, his rise from a single diner in Seattle 40 years ago to a national empire, his recent initiatives in employee welfare programs and sustainability. It mentioned almost as an aside that he'd been gradually losing his vision over the past decade due to a degenerative condition and was now completely blind, but continued to run the company with the help of adaptive technologies and a dedicated team. Maya stared at the photo for a long time, the bus swaying beneath her, the city lights sliding past the window, the man she'd served eggs to 50 times, the man she'd just helped across the street like he was anyone else. He owned the company. He owned her diner. He was probably worth more money than she could even conceptualize, and she'd been giving him slightly burnt toast for a year. She felt something twist in her stomach that wasn't quite embarrassment but wasn't quite anything else either. He'd never said anything, never mentioned who he was, just came in, ate his eggs, paid his bill, tipped his 20% and left. Maya looked up Henderson Restaurant Group when she got home, scrolling through their website with a kind of morbid curiosity. The company employed over 15,000 people. Their corporate values talked about dignity, respect, and treating workers fairly, but Maya knew the reality. She made $9 an hour, plus tips. She had no health insurance. She'd been denied a raise twice. The diner was understaffed, the equipment was falling apart, and Gary, the manager, spent more time in his office watching sports than actually managing anything. Tuesday morning came with rain, the kind of steady drizzle that made the city look grey and tired, and exactly like Maya felt. She'd barely slept, her mind spinning with questions she couldn't answer, and thoughts that went nowhere productive. Should she say something to him? Should she pretend she didn't know? Did it even matter? The man owned 200 restaurants, and she was just one waitress in one diner in one city. She was less than a number to him. She was invisible. She clocked in at 5:58, poured herself a coffee she wasn't supposed to have until her break, and started prep work with Danny, who'd recovered from whatever mysterious illness had struck him down the day before. "You look like hell," Danny observed helpfully. "Thanks, you too." The morning rush came and went, the usual parade of construction workers and nurses, ending night shifts and early meeting business types who ordered everything to go. Maya moved through it mechanically, her body on autopilot while her brain stayed stuck on Robert Henderson and his 20% tips, and the way he'd smiled when she helped him cross the street. At 7:15 a.m. exactly, he walked through the door, same suit, different color, same white cane, same dark glasses. He made his way to booth 7 with the kind of careful confidence that came from routine, from knowing exactly how many steps from the door to the booth, exactly where the table edge would be. Maya grabbed the coffee pot and walked over, her heart doing something weird in her chest. "Morning, sir." She poured his coffee, watching his face for any sign that he recognized her voice from yesterday, from the intersection, but there was nothing, just that same small smile. "Good morning." "The usual, please." Maya wrote it down and walked away, feeling something like disappointment, or maybe anger, or maybe just the crushing weight of her own insignificance. Of course he didn't recognize her voice. Why would he? She was the help. She was part of the background noise of his life, as forgettable as the traffic sounds or the rain on the window. She brought his eggs and toast, and he thanked her, and she went back to the other tables, serving and clearing and running cards through the ancient credit card machine that took 30 seconds to process each transaction. When he stood to leave, he walked to the register where Maya was stationed, and she rang him up, and he paid with a credit card embossed with his name, Robert Henderson, right there in raised letters, and she wondered if he knew that she could see it, that she knew who he was, or if he just assumed the world was as blind to him as he was to it. It was Thursday the next time he came in, and Maya had decided she was going to say something. She didn't know what exactly, but something. The whole situation felt absurd now, like she was in on a joke that no one else knew existed. She watched him walk in, watched him navigate to booth 7, watched him settle in with that precise economy of movement. She poured his coffee and set it down, and before she could stop herself, the words came out. "I helped you cross 5th and Madison on Tuesday." He went still, his hand frozen halfway to the coffee cup, and for a moment Maya thought she'd made a terrible mistake, that there was some unspoken rule she'd just violated. But then his face changed, that controlled smile shifting into something more genuine, more surprised. "That was you. I thought I recognized your voice, but I wasn't certain." He gestured to the seat across from him. "Please, sit for a moment if you can." Maya glanced around. The morning rush was over. Just 3 other tables occupied, all with food already. She slid into the booth, feeling strange sitting across from a customer, from her boss's boss. "The usual?" she asked, her notebook ready. He waved it away. "In a moment. I wanted to thank you properly for Tuesday. The city should fix that signal, but in the meantime, I'm grateful for the assistance." Maya shrugged. It wasn't a big deal. Anyone would have done it. His expression shifted slightly, something sad moving across his face. "You'd be surprised how often people don't. They're uncomfortable, or they assume I can manage, or they simply don't notice." He paused, his fingers tracing the edge of the coffee cup. I try to maintain my independence to navigate the city on my own as much as possible, but there are times when I need help, and it means something when people offer it without making it feel like charity. Maya didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable exactly, but weighted with something she couldn't name. Finally, he spoke again. "You work here full time?" She nodded, then remembered he couldn't see it. "Yeah, 3 years now, 6 days a week usually." He was quiet for a moment, his face turned slightly toward the window, toward the sound of traffic and rain. "And do you enjoy it?" The question caught her off guard, and she almost laughed. Enjoy it? Who enjoyed waiting tables at a dying diner for $9 an hour? But something in his tone suggested he actually wanted to know, that this wasn't just small talk. Maya took a breath and decided to tell him the truth, or at least part of it. "Honestly, no, I don't enjoy it. But it pays the bills. Most. I dropped out of college when my mom got sick, and this was supposed to be temporary, but temporary has a way of becoming permanent when you're not paying attention." She watched his face, trying to read his reaction behind those dark glasses. "The work's fine, the people are fine, but there's no future in it, you know? No health insurance, no raises, no path forward. It's just day after day of the same thing, and you look up one day and realize you're exactly where you were 3 years ago, except now you're 3 years older and 3 years more tired." He nodded slowly, his jaw tight. "I see. And the management here, they treat you fairly?" Maya hesitated. This was dangerous territory. She didn't know if he knew who she knew he was, didn't know if this was some kind of test, but she'd already started telling the truth, so she might as well continue. "Define fairly." "They follow the law, mostly, pay minimum wage, give the required breaks. But fairly, I don't know. Gary, the manager, he's not a bad guy, but he doesn't really care either. The equipment breaks and doesn't get fixed. We're always understaffed. The Employee of the Month program ended 2 years ago because corporate cut the budget for the bonus. It's just a job, and we're just bodies filling positions until we quit, and they hire someone else." Robert Henderson was very quiet now, his hand wrapped around the coffee cup, knuckles white. When he spoke, his voice was lower, harder. "I didn't know things had deteriorated this much. The reports I receive, the numbers, they show adequate performance, acceptable margins, reasonable employee retention, but numbers don't tell you about broken equipment or cancelled recognition programs." Maya felt a chill run through her. "Wait, you're talking like..." She stopped, watching his face. "You know that I know who you are." It wasn't a question. He smiled, and this time there was something sad in it. "I suspected on Tuesday when you helped me cross the street." The voice was too familiar. "And how many people serve me eggs twice a week?" I confirmed it later when I asked my assistant to check the employee roster for this location. Maya Chen, hired 3 years ago, consistently high customer feedback scores, 3 disciplinary notices for minor tardiness, 2 denied raise requests. He paused. "I read all of that in Braille on Tuesday night, and I've been trying to figure out what to say to you ever since." Maya felt her chest tighten. "So this whole conversation is what? Some kind of corporate investigation? You're checking up on me?" He shook his head quickly. "No, this is me trying to understand the gap between what I think my company is and what it actually is. The numbers tell me one story, Maya. You're telling me another, and I've built my entire life on the principle that you can't lead what you don't understand." 3 weeks after that conversation, things started changing at Henderson's downtown diner, and Maya didn't know what to make of it. First, the crew showed up to replace the grill and repair the refrigeration units that had been running on borrowed time for 2 years. Then corporate sent an email announcing a wage increase, $1.50 per hour for all hourly employees, effective immediately. Then Gary got transferred to another location, and a new manager arrived, a woman named Patricia, who had 17 years of restaurant management experience, and actually seemed to care about things like staffing levels and employee morale. The employee recognition program came back with actual monetary bonuses attached. Danny got promoted to shift lead with a raise. The uniform replacement policy was updated so people weren't wearing clothes held together with hope and safety pins, and through it all, Robert Henderson kept coming in on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7:15 a.m., ordering his black coffee and eggs over easy and wheat toast, sitting in booth 7, and Maya kept serving him without saying much beyond pleasantries. She didn't know what to say. Thank you felt insufficient, asking why felt presumptuous, so she just brought his coffee and took his order and rang him up, and they maintained this strange unspoken understanding between them. But one Thursday morning, about 6 weeks after everything started changing, he did something different. When she brought his check, there was an envelope underneath it with her name written on the outside in braille and in ink. She looked at him, confused, but he just smiled that small smile and stood to leave. "You told me the truth when I asked," he said quietly. "That's rarer than you'd think. The envelope is a thank you in part, but also an opportunity if you're interested. No pressure either way." He left before she could respond, navigating through the diner and out the door with his white cane, and Maya stood there holding the envelope, her heart pounding. Inside was a letter, printed in large, clear type, explaining that Henderson Restaurant Group was starting a management training program for hourly employees with aptitude and dedication, and that she'd been recommended for the first cohort. The program included full tuition coverage for her to complete her degree, while working reduced hours at full pay, followed by guaranteed placement in a salaried management position. At the bottom, handwritten in slightly shaky letters, was a note: "Everyone deserves a path forward. Thank you for helping me cross the street, and for helping me see what I was missing, Robert." Maya read it 3 times, standing by booth 7 while Danny cleared tables around her, and the morning rush started building. She thought about that intersection, about offering her arm to a blind man, about a small kindness that she'd thought meant nothing. She thought about the gap between who people are and who we assume they are, about invisible privileges and invisible struggles, and the way we're all just trying to navigate a world we can't always see clearly. The city outside the window kept moving, indifferent and eternal, and Maya Chen folded the letter carefully and put it in her apron pocket and went back to work, but this time with something she hadn't felt in 3 years burning bright in her chest. It felt a lot like hope.